You can say it's grand. It's not grand if you're not on it, though.
OTB AM's Mount Rushmore.
Okay, it is time to turn our attention to south of the River Liffey. The North Dublin Mount Rushmore has been done. We've got Liam Brady, John Giles, Stephen Cluxon and Brian O'Driscoll there. Now we've got the South Dublin Mount Rushmore next up. We've got Phil Egan and Stephen Doyle here. Lads, how are you getting on?
Great stuff on. All good?
Yeah, all good, yeah.
Let's start with this controversial idea that we have indeed split Dublin in two, Steve. How do you feel about that?
I'm absolutely disgusted on. Well, look, people start saying, well, this is just the same as in GAA where they're trying to split Dublin in two because we're so successful. I actually, to be honest with you, what I think we really should do is, because Dublin is, of course, the most important county in Ireland, we really should have 6 heads on our Mount Rushmore. I don't know if Phil agrees with that. I think it's
8. Why not 8?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, there was talk this morning of splitting it into 4, and things are getting quite messy already. I didn't realise...
See, the thing as well, sorry, Owen, to cut across you, but the thing is as well, unlike Kerry, we're not limited to just one sport. We're multifaceted. We can play snooker, we can do athletics, we can do GAA, we can do boxing. We can, you name a sport, we could do it all. I'm not sure about down the kingdom, but we're pretty talented all round.
You obviously missed our Kerry Mount Rushmore, where there was an illustrious array of different sports. But of course, only 4 footballers made it on the mountain in the end. Phil, what are the first things that come to your mind when you think about the great sports people of South Dublin? Is there any names that immediately come to the tip of your tongue?
Yeah, well, growing up in South Dublin, obviously watching the Irish football team, Paul Mcgrath was the name that was mentioned because of the Dalkey United connection. And I'm going to show you something here, obviously, which off the ball viewers of the OTB AM viewers as well will be very familiar with, this World Cup 90 folder. And people wonder where it came from. Well, it's mine.
All right.
I kindly donated it. So if I go, it's coming with me. No, but at the front of this there's a couple of autographs. It's quite fitting as well, given the week that's in it. Jack Charlton laid to rest. But there's 2 autographs in there. The top one is Paul Mcgrath, and the other one is Jack Charlton. But the Paul Mcgrath one, so a young Phil Egan growing up in South Dublin, there was a letter for me that came through the letterbox, and which would never have happened as a young kid. Or why would it? All I had at that stage was a few football jerseys and my Henry the Hippo Ulster Bank money saver thing, with a few coins in it. But this arrived in anyway, and my dad said, "Oh, look, there's a letter here for you." I opened it up. There it is, and it read, "To Philip Egan," this is my full name. "Best wishes, Paul Mcgrath." And what that did for me as a kid, my God, I treasured it, and obviously I still have it. But it's around the time when Ireland are playing in these major tournaments. Paul Mcgrath is one of the key figures in it. The more you think back to what's been revealed, what was going through, or what he was going through at the time, between things off the pitch, obviously injuries as well. We know how bad his knee was, and there he is playing in a couple of World Cups, marking Roberto Baggio out of a game, getting named in the getting named PFA Player of the Year and the Team of the Year as well. Just unbelievable. And, how he got to all of that, it's just an incredible story. And I think when you talk about Mount Rushmore, it's to find characters like Paul Mcgrath.
An absolute legend is kind of what is a prerequisite for a Mount Rushmore. With the amount of quality that Dublin has, being an extremely high achiever is not going to be enough, Stephen. It is going to be somebody that needs to be in the hearts of the entire nation, really.
Yeah, definitely. I've been watching all these Mount Rushmores county by county very closely, and I know a lot of the response that we get in social media is people kind of listing out the achievements of all these different sports people, and rightly so, because we've had some great sports people both on the world stage and back here. But for me, Mount Rushmore is somebody who's iconic, somebody who represents the Irish spirit, and I think Paul Mcgrath did that brilliantly. If you just look at his achievements at first, he went to play for St. Patrick's Athletic before Manchester United. He only played about 30 matches. He won the PFAI Player of the Year in his first season there before moving on to Manchester United. Of course, we know he had a decent success at United. Won an FA Cup there. He got to 2 finals. He was competing with United. I think they came second to Liverpool in '88 under Ferguson, before Ferguson moved him on then to Aston Villa. And we know he's an absolute hero at Aston Villa. The famous thing, they still sell Aston Villa shirts with Paul's number 5 and God on them at Villa Park. As Phil said, the amount of injuries that he had as well. We know towards the latter end of his career, he had no knees. I was kind of looking back when he moved on to Derby County. Interestingly enough, I think it was 1997. They played a game, Derby County, against Manchester United at Old Trafford. United were going for the league title. They only had a 6-point lead, I think, at the time. Derby County went to Old Trafford and they beat Manchester United with 3-2. Paul Mcgrath got man of the match in 1997. He was nearly 37 years of age. Like, that's incredible. And that to me epitomises what Paul Mcgrath was all about. When the odds were stacked against him, he pulled it out of the bag every single time. And if you look at his caps as well, it was 83 caps. Like, that was a player of his generation. That's a phenomenal amount of caps. And I know we're used to seeing Irish internationals now getting 100 caps or more, not so much on a regular basis, but there's a handful of them now. And that's because there are so many international games. But for Paul to get 83 caps, for a man who struggled with fitness issues so badly. But to me as well, during that period of success for Ireland, when Paul Mcgrath was the leader of that team, playing in a couple of different positions as well, wherever Jack Charlton wanted to play, he did his job. But he was the only Irish player in that team who had a chance for him and him only, And I remember being on the South Terrace with my £2 schoolboy ticket, going to Ireland games, and when Paul was playing at his best and the crowd all chanting "Ooh, Paul Mcgrath," there was an experience nothing like it really going to Irish matches at the time. And I think if there was an Irish Mount Rushmore, I think Paul Mcgrath would be on it. So I don't think there's any question of Paul Mcgrath being left off a Dublin Mount Rushmore, whether it be south side, north side, the whole county. He's just an absolute legend.
I think it's fair to say that he's the first name up on the mountain from the south side. Both of you totally agree on this. Is there anybody from the sport of football that would come close to knocking Paul Mcgrath off the mountain?
Look, you could list off a few names there. Robbie Keane, our record goal scorer, 68 goals. He's number 17 in the world. He's the 15th in the all-time Premier League goal scoring list. Got 127 Premier League goals, I think. Proud Talaman. He was, an iconic Premier League player for so many years at Tottenham Hotspur. Went off and to play for LA Galaxy, and he did great things with LA Galaxy and helped, I suppose, inject soccer into the consciousness of America for many years. A captain of the team for so long, and of course, a scorer of an iconic goal at the 2002 World Cup against Germany. I think Richard Dunn could be mentioned as well. Fantastic player, great servant over the years. Did great things in the Premier League, and then of course Damien Duff, back-to-back league winner with Chelsea. Took a Fulham team, helped take a Fulham team to a European final as well. A very unfancied Fulham team, and he's doing great things in coaching as well. Now he's giving back to his country, and he's helped Celtic achieve the 9 in a row as a coach as well. I suppose there's just 3 I can kind of mention off the top of my head. I'm sure Phil would mention more as well.
Yeah, like Robbie Keane, I think, is like the 3 you mentioned. Robbie Keane would be the one I would pick out of those 3, because I think one thing that has transpired since Robbie Keane has left international football, and this was the talk around the time he was coming to the end, that maybe he'd be appreciated more when he left, because we'd realise how good he was. Because when he broke into the team, he was a teenager, chirpy, full of confidence. Sometimes Irish people don't like too much confidence and swagger, because they think, he's this young lad going around thinking he can take on the world. But you think back to the playoff against Iran, he comes up with a goal in that game. Then the Germany goal, which Steve-O mentioned as well. But even the Spain game, he had the bottle to knock that penalty and to send it into extra time. Ian Hart had missed a penalty. Robbie Keane steps up, scores his penalty, and then takes a penalty in the shootout as well. It wasn't a very good shootout for Ireland, but Robbie Keane came up with the goods, and there was, for some reason, there was talk that he didn't score goals in big games, which we've just mentioned a few there, that when the pressure was on, Robbie Keane came up with the goods. And even if you're talking about his Premier League career, you won't be very familiar with the Premier League 100 club. If you watch his array of goals in that as well, I mean, he scores all sorts of goals. I remember he scored one from outside the box for Spurs against Chelsea, curls in at the top corner. One that he scores where it results from a throw-in, where he chips the ball over a few players against Blackburn. He just scored brilliant goals. And obviously, since he's gone, we don't score as many goals, and hopefully that'll change under Stephen Kenny. But Richard Dunn is one of those as well, where he goes down as one of the great Ireland defenders. But unfortunately, you can't put him in the same category as Paul Mcgrath or even the likes of Liam Brady, Johnny Giles.
Yeah, and we might get into the idea of who actually wins out in the county-wide football chat if we have time at the end. But I do want to move on, Stephen. I'm not sure where you want to go next. We have Paul Mcgrath up as a definite so far. He's definitely on the mountain. We've run the rule over a couple of the footballers who might join him. But who would be your second pick? Because you're going to go elsewhere from football now at this point.
Well, I'll move into an area where Phil is probably more of an expert than I am, but I'm also a big boxing fan. And there's two names I can mention straight off the top here, and it's Bernard Dunn and Michael Crute. I remember going to the Bernard Dunn world title fight against Ricardo Cordoba, and when he won that world title, and it was just, we'd seen Bernard Dunn going through so many tough nights as a boxer against Kiko Martinez in the point, and he was, I suppose one of those guys where he wasn't a hugely one of the most talented boxers you've ever seen, but my God, that fella really had grit, determination, heart and spirit, and something that I think Irish people like to see in their sports, people that represent them on the world stage. And that Cordoba fight is one of the most amazing sporting events I've ever been at in any sport. I can't think of any really that can match it. He was on his arse twice in that fight and got back up on his feet, knocked down Cordoba 3 times himself. And the atmosphere in the Point Theatre that night was just absolutely phenomenal. Like, he was just, and you could say that there was a case to be made for the crowd carrying Bernard Dunn through that fight. But I also think that it was almost a case of Bernard Dunn kind of leading the support, and it was kind of like he was like the man leading this crazy Irish band of supporters into battle against Cordoba. And it was a phenomenal achievement. We don't have a huge amount of world titles regards to boxers in Dublin, but Bernard Dunn is one of them. I think that's why he's definitely in the discussion. I'm pretty disgusted Steve Collins hasn't really been mentioned with regard to the north side of things, but maybe Phil might mention him. But I'd like to talk about Michael Crute as well, because I think Michael Crute would be in my final four, and I'll tell you why. Ireland hadn't won an Olympic gold medal since 1956, going into the Barcelona Olympics in 1992. Ronnie Delaney, of course, won in Melbourne on the athletics track. So we've gone a long, long time without a gold medal. We'd never won a gold medal in boxing. Michael Crute, he came from, a very humble background, walking sound, not too far from my group, myself in Kilnamanagh. My dad actually worked with Michael Crute's wife's dad as well, so kind of knew the family a little bit. So he was a real kind of a local hero, I suppose, in a way. But again, Crute was one of these people that went and represented Ireland on the world stage and just had a phenomenal achievement. He went into that final against the Cuban guy Sierra. Now, Cuba had 9 boxers in 12 finals at that 1992 Olympics. They were basically like the Brazil of boxing for many years going to the Olympic Games, and especially at that one in 1992. 9 boxers out of 12 finals. Only 2 Cubans lost out of those 9 finals, and one of them lost to Michael Crute. I remember getting up, it was a Saturday morning. I remember getting up and watching the fight with my dad, and it's just one of those lovely childhood memories. And when Crute won, I can still remember him celebrating. And I can remember him coming home to Dublin. I remember going out onto the streets to meet him, and the reception he got was just incredible. And he's just one of those Irish people like Katie Taylor, like Padraig Harrington, people that have achieved success in the world stage and lifted the country, like the Irish soccer team did as well. And I think his achievement gets forgotten a little bit too easily, and we shouldn't forget it, because what he did was absolutely phenomenal. As I said, Cuba, they were like Brazil in football to boxing, and for Michael Carruth to go and beat one of those guys in a final, to do what he did was just incredible. And not to forget as well, he went on, worked in the backroom team with the Dublin Hurlers as well. I know it was as a masseuse, but apparently some of his team talks were quite inspirational. He was part of the Dublin hurling backroom team, that the Dublin team that won that first Leinster title in 60 years. By all accounts, Anthony Daly said he gave a very inspirational dressing room talk the following year when Dublin on the verge of relegation, helped them to go out and win and to avoid relegation. So look, he's a great man, Michael Carruth. I think his Olympic gold medal is one of the greatest achievements in Irish sport. That's why I would argue to have him up there.
It's a strong case. Michael Carruth, the second name on your list. Steve-O, Phil, over to you. The boxing hierarchy, where does it lie in your view?
Well, I'm just glad, because one thing I think I have felt over the last few weeks with different Mount Rushmores is boxing getting overlooked. But
fair point.
Look, it's so hard to whittle things down to four, but the admiration I have for boxers, that what they go through to get themselves ready for these fights, and sometimes they go into these big fights and they're not in the best shape of their life because something might have happened along the way. There's little bumps, and what we see on the day we expect them to be able to perform to the best of their ability. It doesn't always happen, but as Steve-O alluded to, that final in Barcelona, Michael Carruth's going up against Juan Hernandez Sierra, who is the current world champion at the time. He's the Pan-American champion. This is a guy that won more world titles as well. The fact that Michael Carruth beat him, so not only is he winning an Olympic gold medal, but he's beating the best to do it. And they say you have to win, you have to beat the best. But sometimes the draw, you could be on the other side of the draw. But he's actually taken out a guy who is the best in the final. It's a day that I'll never forget. I too obviously watched it. We obviously have. My mum is from Donegal, so we used to spend summers in Donegal, and I remember getting up to watch it, and we were sitting in the house, and obviously Wayne Mccauley had fought that day as well. He got the silver medal, but just the way it's set up, where obviously the score is kind of going in, but it's all hidden until that last decision. Referees holding the two arms, and you don't know whose arm is going to raise. And when Michael Carruth's, actually when Steve was talking about Michael Carruth there, I was kind of getting goosebumps, because you just think back to the moment, and it's just an amazing moment for Irish sport. And even touching, I was lucky enough actually to cover. I was working for Dublin Station at the time. Steve would have covered the footballers that year in 2013. I was covering the hurlers, and obviously Michael Carruth was part of that. But the players absolutely adored him. Obviously he's there to do a job, but the advice he'd give them, and just that spirit that himself and Anthony Daly and the rest of the management team would have given, and you could see it because we'd be waiting around the bus. That was the year that Dublin went to a replay against Kilkenny, and they beat them in Portlaoise after people saying you don't give Kilkenny a second chance. But you're waiting around the bus, and you see all these guys going out, and Michael Carruth was just one of these lads that all the lads absolutely loved. Bernard Dunn, I was there that night. Steve, I know you were working. I was there as a patron, and I have to say it's up there with the best sporting events I've ever been to. Obviously, it's the same day Ireland win the Grand Slam, and I remember I'm ironing my shirt to go to the point that night as Ronan O'Gara kicks the winning drop goal, and I just can't wait for this Bernard Dunn fight, because it was there for the disappointment of when Kiko Martinez beat him in the first round, and it was disappointing not only to lose for Bernard Dunn, but the fact that it emptied the venue out very quickly, and I kind of thought Bernard Dunn deserved better. So the fact that he redeemed it on the night against Cordoba, he got up off the deck, and it was just an explosive, electric atmosphere. And even when he went on to lose his world title fight against Poon Swat, there was the admiration there that he was applauded out of the arena. He got that, that admiration was there. That connection between Bernard Dunne and the Dublin people and Irish sports fans as well was there. And yeah, as Steve said, you don't win many world titles, and to do it and the manner that he did it as well was incredible. And yeah, I was surprised Steve Collins maybe didn't get enough love, because one thing we talk about a lot in boxing is that era of Ben and Eubank. Collins beat them both.
Yeah.
Beat them both. He beat Eubank twice.
It's a good point. Like, we do have Brian Kerr on the overall Dublin list, by the way, who's a big boxing aficionado, so he might be able to get Steve Collins a better mention, despite the fact that North Dublin's already been and gone. So we're not limiting it to what makes it to the north side or the south side mountain. But just to confirm, so Phil, you would definitely have Michael Carruth as your number one boxer from South Dublin.
Yeah, I would, and it's a tough one, because I don't want to diminish what Bernard Dunne did, which was incredible. But I think that Olympic glory, Michael Carruth, yeah, I would definitely have him. I can't argue with that selection.
Okay.
Yeah, it's funny as well, actually, because Bernard Dunne, as we just to add, it's funny as well, I suppose, coincidental that Bernard Dunne, of course, went on to help out the Dublin senior football team. They went to have all that success. So just unusual that you had two boxers, that achieved great things, and then going on to use their, I suppose, motivational talents to help both codes in Dublin GAA.
Well, will we go to your GAA pick then, Stephen?
Yeah, look, well, I suppose just to add on to what we were talking about from the soccer end of things, and there's a man there that straddles both the soccer and GAA worlds, who doesn't make my list, but I thought long and hard about it. But Kevin Moran, what a man! Like, just an incredible all-round talented sportsman. He goes to win. He wins 2 All-Irelands with Dublin, and before going on then to have a really good career with Manchester United. Wins an FA Cup with them. I know he was sent off in the game, but still achieved great things with that Manchester United team. They went off and played La Liga football with Sporting Gijon. And then, he's in his late 30s, and he goes on, makes nearly 150 appearances for Blackburn Rovers when he, it was so hard for players back then, who were kind of in their early to mid 30s to keep going. They obviously didn't have the access to kind of the sports science that players do nowadays to help extend their careers. But, Kevin Moran, and, he was before my time really when it comes to Gaelic football. And like, I would have been going to Croke Park with my dad from the early 80s. But he would have told me quite a lot about Kevin Moran. And I suppose even you watch the old footage, like, he kind of, to me, he kind of epitomised that kind of really battling, driving, hard as nails player that really kind of motivates his teammates, not by his words, but by the way he plays. And he was the same for Manchester United as well. And I had a great partnership there with Paul Mcgrath for a short time at Old Trafford. And he just always comes across a great guy, and one of those fellas as well he's loved by his fellow county people all over Dublin. You mentioned Kevin Moran's name, and people love him. There's a couple of other honourable mentions, and when I tweet out that we're going to be talking about this today, there's a few people mentioned Jim Stein's name, and I know he's not strictly a Gaelic man, but he grew up a Gaelic man and obviously moved off to Australia then and became an absolute legend of Australian football, Aussie rules. And sadly we lost him obviously a number of years ago to cancer. But you speak to anybody in Dublin GAA circles and about Jim Steins, and he's very highly respected man. I've spoken to a couple of his teammates. Paul Clark would have played with him minor level and knew him very well, very close to him, and he speaks really highly of Jim Steins. He went over to play Aussie rules. Obviously not an Aussie rule player, but he had a record 244 consecutive appearances for Melbourne. He won the Brownlow medal. He's the only non-Australian born player to win the Brownlow medal, which is the highest honour in the game for the best and fairest player. He won the MVP in that same year as well. But then he went on, after he retired from AFL, he went on to do some great charity work, youth charity work, which, he's highly respected for in Australia. There's a room in the Melbourne cricket grounds named after Jim Steins. Like, that's not even a sport. And they have a room at one of the most famous cricket grounds in the world named after him. So that kind of goes to show you how highly respected Jim Stynes was and is still to this day. Of course, Ballybone club man as well, I should mention. There's another man from his club, Ballybone, St. Enda's, Michael Dara Mccauley, I think deserves an honourable mention. 7 All-Irelands, 1 All-Ireland with his club, Ballybone, as well. I think he's a Footballer of the Year, obviously, in 2013. I think he's been a great leader within that Dublin team. Very modest guy. I don't want to say too much about him because I know him personally, so I don't think I'm trying to look for any favours here. But look, he's a great fella, Michael. He's done some great work as well with North Inner City Charities as well, which I think he's highly respected for. And I think he deserves a mention. Southside footballers. There's so many. I think the north side probably edges it. Paul Curran is another one. Actually,
he's probably my favourite. He's probably my favourite player from that '95 team, where just Mr. Consistent, always just marauding down the right wing, great defender, and obviously what he achieved. He obviously played Thomas Davis, but he would have played for my own club, Kilmacud, as well. And even what he did with Ballymun, to get them to win the Dublin Championship with them and get them to the final hurdle before they lost that club final, the All-Ireland club final. I was lucky enough to cover a good few of those games as well. So he was Mr. Consistent. But Jim Stynes was some player. And even the documentary, when it shows how he dealt with his illness, just an incredible human. And his brother Brian Stynes wasn't a bad player either.
Yeah, Paul Curran as well, of course. Phil, great manager as well. He won Dublin County Championships with Ballymun Kickham's. Very unlucky not to win the final actually as well. They only lost out by a point in 2013, I think it was, wasn't it? Ballymun Kickham's were in the final. So Paul Curran, not just a great player, but also another great guy who's really he's a GAA man at heart. And he's a great guy for coaching young players and that kind of thing. Look, there's so many, and I think even growing up, when I was growing up going to Croke Park, I think a lot of my heroes were probably Northsiders. My mum and dad are both Finglas, so I kind of look at myself as a bit of an honorary Northsider as well. But the likes of John O'Leary, he was a hero for me. Charlie Redmond. I think probably, though, as a young man, I was only probably 15, going to Croke Park when we won the All-Ireland in '95. Jason Sherlock was just, an absolute hero and a brilliant player. I think an inspirational figure. He was one of those players, I think, that would have attracted a lot of young men, young boys and girls to play Gaelic football. Having seen his performances, he made Gaelic football cool again in the mid-90s, I think.
He would have blown up social media. He would have blown up social media with that goal without his boot.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, since we've kind of, since he's retired and we've learned a bit more about his background, again, another really solid guy. He went through a lot of tough stuff in his life. And I think he also represents the new Dublin, the new kind of Dublin, we're very ethnic background of, multi-ethnic, I should say, Dublin, with his background, that kind of thing. So another great guy, Jason Sherlock. But look, I think in the end, when you're plumping for a Southside representative for Gaelic football, sorry, I should mention as well, Owen, and I think it boiled down to two names for me. And one was a historical figure who I can't really tell you about as a player, but Kay Mills, I think, should be mentioned in the conversation, because Kay Mills was an absolute GAA superstar back in the early 1900s, from around 1930s up to the 1950s. She won 15 All-Ireland titles with Dublin as a camogie player. She was from Inchicore and an absolutely inspirational figure. There's a good piece about her on the Royal Irish Academy website. No other player in the history of Gaelic Games has won 15 All-Ireland medals. She sadly passed away kind of around the mid-90s, but there was a lovely line in the piece about her on the RIA website that said, after games, men used to take off their hats and look to shake her hand, which is a kind of, I suppose, when we see women's sport is struggling nowadays or not nowadays, it's getting better, but over the last kind of few decades, we've seen how women's sport has struggled to find equality with men's sport. And when you think back all those years and years ago, that a woman like that who was putting on these performances and people trying to shake her hand after games, incredible. 15 All-Ireland medals. There was talk of naming a bridge after in Dublin. I think they probably still should. Sinead Goldrick's probably worth a mention as well. 3 All-Irelands in a row with Dublin. She's off down playing Aussie rules now as well. A great player, one of the best, probably the best defender of our generation, you could argue as well. But look, I think I'm going to plumb for Jim Gavin in the end when it comes to a Gaelic representative. Jim Gavin is just a phenomenal man. And when I put the shout out on Twitter, his name just kept coming back to me. I think both for GA people, both casual fans and for true club people, he's a hero. He won the All-Ireland as a player, obviously in '95. He wouldn't have been one of the big standout players, maybe not hugely talented, but a really important part of that Dublin team. He had real grit and determination about his performances, and even when he kind of when his playing career was sort of fading out, by all accounts, everything you read, he was still there training sessions, working his nuts off, and trying to help other players to be better men and better players as well. But look, his achievements as a manager are just second to none. I think Kevin Heffernan revolutionised the game back in the 60s and 70s, and Jim Gavin has done the same over the last 10 or so years. I suppose Gaelic football had a bit of a reputation for being quite defensive in the 2000s before Gavin came along, and of course I know Sean Potts was paying great tribute to Pat Kilroy, as rightly he should. Pat Kilroy was hugely instrumental in turning Gaelic football around in the city, and Jim Gavin took over the reins, and what he did was phenomenal. He's achieved the 5 in a row, but he got that Dublin team playing a really attractive brand of attacking football. He made football exciting, I think, with the way he had that team playing. I know he had a bunch of hugely talented players at his disposal, like so many great achievements. They went 35 league and championship matches unbeaten. That was absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible. To win 6 All-Ireland titles, the first manager to achieve 5 in a row. Like, you could talk about Jim all day. Very selfless man. We know he's done a lot of training sessions around the country with different clubs. He's very giving with his time to clubs around the city as well. And then you look at his achievements outside sport. He's been honoured by the United Nations for his work in war zones as a peacekeeper. He's just a phenomenal man, and he's just a picture of coolness and calmness on the sideline. And I think that was a part of the reason why Dublin were so successful under him.
We might come back to him in just a moment, but your list so far is Paul Mcgrath, Jim Gavin and Michael Carruth. I know, Phil, you've got to go and do a bulletin, so we're going to just have to kill the tension just for one moment here, Stephen. If you might quickly reveal your final name so we can get Phil's change.
Padraig Harrington.
We'll come back and give Padraig Harrington all the credit he deserves in just a moment. But Phil, you do have the very quick decision to make here between making a change or not. The list is strong.
To make a change because it's hard to you don't have Harrington. To, Harrington was nailed on for me.
Okay.
Paul Mcgrath was nailed on for me. Jim Gavin, I mean, he's won 5 All-Irelands in a row. Obviously, he won 6, but you can't leave him out. And then so we went Mcgrath, Michael Carruth. Yeah, so I actually, like, myself and Steve get along, so it was always going to be, we kind of have to, like, when it comes to sport, we have a lot of the same thoughts. Even about when we're looking at football, we'll have a lot of the same thoughts. So it's probably no surprise that we're fairly unanimous with our decision, because the rugby fraternity probably won't be happy. Phil, no, well, I mean, Johnny Sexton deserves a serious shout out. Obviously, he would have probably, a lot of people would have thought when he wins the Senior Cup with St Mary's in 2002, that's it. Like, that is the peak of it. I mean, how can you follow that? But then obviously turns out he goes on to have, and he's still playing, obviously has an unbelievable career. And I was at the game in 2009 when he comes on for Contapomi, and I often wonder what would have happened that day if Contapomi didn't get injured. First of all, would Leinster have gone on to win the game? Because obviously, Contapomi had a few tough afternoons against Munster. But obviously, Sexton comes on, and that was, the start of it really for him. And he's had an incredible career. As I said, he's still going. He's won 4 European Cups, 6 Nations 3 times, obviously a Grand Slam, World Player of the Year. So the only thing he hasn't done is get a World Cup, and obviously, that's something that unfortunately all Ireland teams have failed to do. But Johnny Sexton definitely deserves a mention. Tony Ward, obviously an Irish international, played in that Limerick team under Owen Hand as well, that won the FAI Cup. So I'm always in admiration for lads that would try their hand at a few different sports. I know Steve was mentioning Kevin Moran, but to go different shape of ball altogether.
Well, that's hugely impressive. I think Kevin Moran is the kind of top of the list of omissions here, right beside Johnny Sexton and Robbie Keane here. It's an unbelievable selection. But Phil, thanks a million. I know you got to go do the J job. We'll let you drop out of the call. But
all right, thanks, guys.
You've done a great job here, Steve-O. There's been no disagreement whatsoever, and we've usually had a bit of disagreement. So let's just go back to Padraig Harrington then. He is your final pick on this mountain. What was the thought process behind him, and why did he stick out ahead of the rest, ahead of the other footballers, ahead of the other GAA people, and ahead of someone like Ken Doherty and Johnny Sexton?
Yeah, Ken Doherty is another one. I'm a bit heartbroken after leave Ken off, because I would have been a big snooker fan as well, growing up over the years, and I would have started off as a snooker fan back in the 80s. I'm watching the likes of Alex Higgins and Steve Davis, Stephen Hendry, Jimmy White, all brilliant, and then all of a sudden we had this Irish hero, Ken Doherty, coming onto the stage, and he got to 2 World Finals in the end, but 1997 winning that final against Stephen Hendry, the greatest player that ever played the game. And again, one of these kind of guys that he did it for Ireland on the world stage, really inspirational man, a lovely fella to boot as well. And his homecoming as well is one of those kind of moments as a young fella. I was a little bit older, I was about 17, I think, maybe, when Ken won the world title, but his homecoming was another one of those kind of memorable days as a young sports fan. And he got he went out on the Old Trafford pitch as well. He's invited over there with his Crucible trophy, and it feels a little bit wrong to leave him off the list, but there's just so many that you can't fit them all on. Yeah, well, and just before I mentioned Padraig Harrington as well, Eamon Coughlin was another name that kept getting fired at me last night as well. And like, what an incredible man Eamon Coughlin was. Again, looks before my time, so you're kind of of his achievements, but even just going back and reading about him, the chairman of the boards, obviously he was nicknamed Owen because he was hugely successful as an indoor runner. He won 52 of his 70 races at 1,500 meters and 1 mile from 1974 to 1987. That's just phenomenal stuff, really, isn't it? I think he broke the mile record 3 different times. He was unlucky at 2 Olympic Games, but he finished 4th at 2 Olympic Games. We did get that World Championship gold medal in 1983 in Helsinki. That was probably his greatest achievement. And I know there'd be a lot of people out there who'd be probably of a certain generation, maybe a little bit older than myself, and probably be a little bit angry that Eamon Coughlin's been left off the list. But he definitely should be in the conversation. Maybe if it was somebody else, they'd have him on there. But look, Padraig Harrington, we know how competitive golf can be. How tough a sport it can be. I have to, I have to admit, I'm not like the biggest. I wouldn't be like Nathan Murphy, Joe Malloy kind of golf fan, but I would be somebody who gets interested when the majors are on, and that's where Padraig Harrington excels. I think to achieve what he achieved, which is to win back-to-back Open Championships, that's just phenomenal. And in between it, then to win another major, he also tied 5th, I think, wasn't it, in the Masters as well. And just, I suppose he's one of those guys that he put Ireland on the map when it came to golf. I feel bad because I'm not a golf aficionado. I can't speak as well as maybe a golf nerd could about Padraig Harrington, but I don't think anybody would argue. Anybody from Dublin would argue about having him there. He's a Rathfarnham man, never forgot his roots. He's a really nice fella as well. I think he's one of those names, a bit like Paul Mcgrath and and the likes of Kevin Moran and these guys who people would speak quite affectionately about when it comes to Dublin sports people. But yeah, so look, we've seen other great golfers in the world who've won the Open Championship. It's the greatest golf competition of them all. Some say, some would argue maybe the Masters, but to go and win that back-to-back, that success he had in those 12 to 18 months was just absolutely incredible. And to, you know, to remain at the top of his game and to have the nerve to do what he did, he's a phenomenal guy and definitely should be on that Mount Rushmore. I'd be killed, wouldn't I, Owen, basically, if I left him off.
If an Irish person has 3 majors, they're in contention for the national Mount Rushmore. Never mind half of their city's Mount Rushmore, in my opinion. So I think Padraig Harrington personally has to be there. It's quite the task you had, Stephen, I must say. Like, I'm just looking at the list of people who aren't on the list. Jim Steins, Ken Doherty, Johnny Sexton, Kevin Moran, Robbie Keane, Bernard Dunn, Damien Duff, Eamon Coughlin, as you say. Like, I mean, yeah. This is making a case that perhaps South Dublin certainly has a bit of strength over its North Dublin compatriots. If you were picking a mountain, would you go that far that it is the better side of the city?
Ooh, yeah, it's a good question actually. Like, I suppose from a football point of view, like I think John Giles would have been my leading football candidate on the north side.
Let's talk about that for a little bit. Just like tomorrow morning now, we're going to have the overall Dublin Mount Rushmore, and we've got 2 footballers coming in from the north side. We've got Liam Brady and we've got John Giles. Are you a Giles over Brady person if you had to pick one from those 2? Yeah,
like look, again, a bit like Eamon Coughlin, a little bit before my time maybe, and I wouldn't have seen him in action. But I know, talking to my dad, he would have gone to Ireland games in Dairyman Park back in the 50s and 60s. And he just said John Giles was one of those players that just lifted the crowd. Everybody wanted to go see John Giles playing football. He said he could hit a pass from a corner flag at one end of the field onto a sixpence down the other end of the field. He was just an incredibly talented footballer. I know he's got a reputation for being a bit of a hard man, but my dad said watching John Giles play football was just one of the greatest things ever. I think he won 59 caps, I think it was, in the end, which again, for a man during those years, I think it was from 1959 to 1980 was it, I think he played. So like, that was again an incredible achievement to get that many international caps, winning 2 league titles with Leeds United at a time when you could argue was perhaps maybe more competitive. A lot more teams maybe competing around that time. He won FA Cups with Manchester United and Leeds United as well. Again, when the FA Cup was a much more highly respected competition maybe than it is now, people kind of forget that. And then he played in a couple of European Cup finals. He got beaten in a European semi-final against Celtic 1970. Played in the final then. Unlucky not to win a European Cup, perhaps.
The referees mentioned in this context.
Yeah. So, yeah, John Giles, like, he's just, like, there's no doubt Liam Brady is an incredible footballer, was an incredible footballer, and he did it in a couple of different countries. And again, when you watch the old clips of him, what a player, like, fantastic. But I just think John Giles, he grew up in the inner city. He's got that, I suppose he's one of the old-fashioned street footballers. He's well respected in his old local community, in the local, in the old north side of the city there around Stony Batter and that kind of area. An absolute hero. So yeah, John Giles, definitely. He's I would have him as the leading football man over there.
Very good, very good. So your final list for Southside is Paul Mcgrath, Jim Gavin, Michael Carruth, and Padraig Harrington. I'm not going to lie, it's a fantastic list. If you had to send a message to tomorrow morning selectors that there was one name off that list that you ain't letting go of, who is it going to be?
Oh, it's definitely between Mcgrath and Carruth. I just hope that they take into consideration Michael Carruth's achievement and who he beat. And as Phil explained even better than I did, you know, that was a world champion. That man was at the peak of his game, and Michael Carruth went out and beat him. Just a local lad from Walkinstown, a great achievement. I hope that's taken into consideration. But I will say as well, you know, Paul Mcgrath would be on. I would even argue Paul Mcgrath could be the first head on the Irish Mount Rushmore, not just the Dublin one. I think he's loved, you know, nationwide. he's an inspirational character. He's an every man, whatever you want to call him. And yeah, Paul Mcgrath is the one.
Well said, Steve-O. Well done. Congratulations on making it out unscathed. Stephen Doyle with your South Dublin Mount Rushmore. Cheers, Steve-O.
OTB AM's Mount Rushmore.